Hey, what's up everyone? In this video, we're going to go over how to create an Azure DevOps pipeline that's going to build a Docker image, push it to the Azure Cloud Registry, and deploy into the Azure App Service. First things first, since I'm using a Mac with Catalina installed, I need to go ahead and install the Azure CLI first. The installation is going to be different for Windows and Linux users. However, using the Azure CLI will be pretty much the same experience, regardless of what operating system you're using. So for you macOS users like me, let's go ahead and install it using brew. Actually, let me start off by searching for it because I don't know the exact name. Okay, so it's a formula. Okay, so we're just going to do brew install Azure-CLI. Okay, looks like it's now done installing. Let's go ahead and we need to log into our Azure account. And let me clear this up so it's easier to read. And to do that, in Azure CLI, you're just going to type in AZ login. And this should bring up a browser. You're going to use your account. Okay, looks like it's logged in now. It says you have logged into Microsoft Azure. So let's close this. And when you log in, it's going to give you, the subscription that you're part of. Okay. Okay, so now we have to create a resource group. So let's go ahead and type in AZ group, create. You have to give it a name. I'm going to use our web API sample.NET application. So I'm going to call it web API. And I like to give it an RG in the name to denote resource group. Location, West US. Okay, our resource group has been created. Okay, now that we have our resource group, we're going to have to create our container registry. And to do that, we're going to type in AZ, ACR, create, resource group. And you have to give it the name of the resource group you created. Mine is called Web API RG. And then you have to give this a name. I'm going to call it SkunkLabz SKU Basic. And if everything went right, we should see it create. Okay, that looks good. Okay, one of the things that you need to note once you create your Azure Container Registry using the Azure CLI is you have to take note of the login server in the output. So when you created it, it outputted some JSON, and this is the one that you're going to be using. So don't forget that. I'm not going to forget mine because it's pretty easy to remember. But either way, I'll add it to my scratch pad over here on outside of my screen. Now we have to log into the registry, so we're going to type in AZ, ACR, login, name, and then SkunkLabz. The name is the name you gave your container registry. Okay, it says login succeeded, so we're good. Now let's see what's in there. Let's type in AZ, ACR, repository, list name, your repo name, and output table. Let's see what we've got there.
Nothing! Absolutely
Okay, so
nothing!
and that's fine. We were expecting that because we've uploaded nothing. So now we're going to go ahead and create a Docker file in our application that we're trying to deploy. If you remember, I used this in a previous example. So there's no Docker file in there. So I'm going to go ahead and create one. And we're going to start off, I'm going to use a multi-stage Docker file, one for building the actual build artifacts, and then I'm going to use that and I'm going to push it into the new image that I'm generating that I'll be using to deploy into the Azure Container Registry, and then I'll push that into the Azure App Service. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to give it a base image. We want the mcr.microsoft.com/.net core SDK as build. So this is our build stage. We're setting the working directory to build. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to copy what's in my host machine, the code, and then I'm going to put it into the actual Docker running container. And then we're going to do the actual build. So we're going to say .NET build. That was correct. Configuration, release. And now the next stage is the actual building of the Docker image that I want. Again, mcr.microsoft.com, which is their own official repo for base images. Okay, so we're going to say .NET here, core, but this time we're going to use ASP.NET and specifically version 3.1-Alpine. So this should give us a nice tidy image. We're going to set the working directory to -app. Again, you can call it whatever you want. And now we're going to tell it copy from the build stage, whatever is in build, bin, release, netcore app 3.1 into our current work directory. And when we start up this Docker container, we want it to run this command, .NET, and then the name of the DLL. That would be weather-api.dll. Close brackets here. And then the port we want to expose, port 80. All right, so let's save this. Let's do a Docker build, tag it with weather-api, and the Docker files in the current directory, so I put a dot. Let's go ahead and run that. It's going to go out to the official Microsoft repo, grab the .NET Core Docker image with the SDK. And the reason we're using stages is so that we don't end up with a really big container, because some of these are like 700, 800 megabytes. And I actually want to use Alpine. That has a smaller footprint, anywhere from 50 to 100 megabytes is what I've seen. Okay, so now it's built our Docker image. How do we know? We type in Docker images, and we can see that the SDK official Docker image from Microsoft is 705 megabytes. Obviously, we don't want that, but our image is only 105 megabytes, so it's pretty lightweight. Okay, let's go ahead and run our Docker container to test it locally. So I'm going to say docker run -d for daemon -p for port 8080, the name of the container. Okay, let's see if it's started. Let's do a docker ps. It says it's been running for 4 seconds. So let's curl localhost /weather forecast. And there it is. So we know it's running because it gave us the sample data. Cool. Let's do docker ps, docker stop, because I don't want this to be running on my machine. And then I'll forget it, and it'll be running all the time. Okay, so here we are in Azure DevOps, and we're going to first create a repo for the code that we have. I deleted the previous one from the previous example, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. weather API. I don't want to initialize it. Create. And I want to switch this to SSH. Copy only that first line. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and copy that command in here. And this will add that remote repo. I'm going to type in git push. I was expecting this error. That's okay. Just going to copy what it's saying. All right, now it's uploaded, pushed my code to the repo. So now we can go ahead and refresh this. And we can see it right here. Okay. Oh, I forgot to do something here. I forgot to add my new Docker file. So I gotta do git add, git commit, -m. Okay. Now we can push, git push. Oopsies. Okay. So now we can refresh this and we should see our Docker file in there. Perfect. Let's go back. So now I want to set up a build. So to do that, from the repo, you can click on set up build, or you can go to pipelines and create a new pipeline. I'm lazy, so I'm going to click on set up build. It's going to give you the same thing. And you can see here that it has Docker build and push an image to Azure Container Registry. So we're going to click on that. Okay, select your Azure subscription. Of course, authenticate. Okay, go ahead and authenticate. SkunkLabz, image name, weather API, and where the Docker file is. Validate and configure, and it auto-magically creates my YAML file. I don't like all these comments, so I'm going to clean that up. Okay, so obviously it's hard-coded a bunch of stuff here. We can remove all that, but I want a quick way to get this going. So since it's already generated, I'm just going to say save and run. And I'm going to commit this directly to my master branch. This is a private repo, so and it's my own repo, so I don't really care. But we'll go back and clean it up, I guess, a bit. So let's go ahead and save and run. Let's watch it do its magic. All right, looks like it's done. All right, let's check out what we have over here. So clear this, ACR. I just pressed that row up because I'm lazy. So it's the same command we ran earlier, ACR, a repository list. You give it the name of your Azure Container Registry and then output table. So we should see our Docker image there. And there it is. So now that that's in the Azure Container Registry, now we can go ahead and build out another pipeline to deploy it. Let's go back over here. And to do that, we're going to go to releases. So you go to the releases blade over here on the left-hand side. We're going to click on new pipeline. And we're going to say Azure App Service deployment. Yes. And we're going to call this develop because that's the stage. Okay. And it's giving me a little attention thing here, which is fine. It basically wants your Azure subscription. And you're going to select yours. Click authorize. Again, authenticate. Okay, that looks good. Now we're going to say the app type is going to be an web app for containers, Linux. The app service name. Oh, we didn't create one. So let's create an app service. Okay, but first we need to, before we can create an app service, we need to configure our resource group to be default in this session. So I'm going to type in az configure defaults group web API-RG, which is the one I created. Yours will be different, of course. Location is West US. And now we're going to create our app service plan. So we're going to type in AZ app service plan create name weather-API-PL SKU F1, and make sure to say it's Linux, so it's Linux. Okay, looks like it's done. So now let's create our web app. So we're going to type in AZ web app create plan weather-API-PL name SkunkLabz weather API deployment container image name is SkunkLabz.azurecr.io/weather API and latest. Okay, looks like it's done. Let's see what it did. Created a site. SkunkLabz Weather API Azure Websites.net. Okay, so let's go back to our pipeline over here. Okay, I'm not sure what happened, but I guess I took too long to refresh my page here, and I'll just recreate the pipeline. It's okay. Okay, so let's go to Azure App Service deployment. Hit apply. We'll call this development. Edit this again. Use our service connection. This is web app for containers. The app service name. Now we're going to type in the registry. Yes, those are chickens you hear in the background. My neighbor has a bunch of them. Sorry about that. AzureCR.io. The repository name is Weather API. And let's go ahead and save this. Click OK. And let's give this a name. Weather API. Save it. Click OK. Let's go back to pipelines. That's not it. Sorry. Let's go to releases. Okay, no deployments found. That's fine. We're going to create a release to development. Let's go look at the logs. Okay, this says it successfully deployed my app service. Hopefully everything went well. Let's grab the URL. Type in weather forecast. Okay, after fooling around with this for a bit, I found out what the issue is. So when I initially created the build pipeline, remember we automatically generated this YAML file. So if we go back and look at it, it's probably a good idea to always review what is being done here. Down here, we see that it automatically sets a tag. So I didn't specify one, right? So it's automatically giving it a tag, a number. And I found that out when I went into the container registry, right? ACR. Let's go in there. And then let's go to the repository, weather API. And we see that it gives it, the build is giving it a tag of 1. And so if we go back to the pipelines and we go to releases and we edit the release pipeline, go back over here, all I had to do was specify that tag. Now I can go back and change this to whatever tag I want, but you know, I'm okay with it giving it 1 for now, just because I wanted to do something that just works and, you know, something that's simple and just straightforward. So that's all I did. All I did was change this to give it the 1 tag. I ran the deployment right here. Of course, if you look at all these deployments, they were all successful. But that's one of the things that you need to notice or think about when you're doing a deployment. Azure DevOps could say that it's done, and as far as it's concerned, it's done. But it doesn't mean it's successful, right? So if we go in here to this number 4, deploy Azure App Service, we see that it goes and gives it this. Now, another way I found out was if we go back to the deployed app, it was giving me an authentication error. And basically it couldn't find the container image. So that was the other clue. But once I changed that tag to 1, if I now go to my portal over here and I go to the app service, I can see that it's running now. And if I click on the link here, it's not going to give us anything. That doesn't mean it's not running. That's just because we need to go to the endpoint, which is weather forecast. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover as far as this. Is it an ideal pipeline? No. But it's a start. And then now we can go in, take a deeper dive. And for example, one of the things that I like to do is this pipeline here. I don't like it being here. I want it to be a part of a YAML file. So that's probably the next thing I'll do. I'll create a YAML version of this. And essentially it's going to do the same thing, but at least our pipeline is captured in versioning, which is what we want. I'm going to leave it here. Thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe and give me your honest feedback on these videos that I'm creating. I really appreciate it. Thank you.